All right. Hello, everybody. Hope you all are doing well. This is DFS Army's NBA pre-lock show where, we'll walk through the slate. I'll show you all what I'm doing on it. But honestly, we're waiting on a lot of news. I think we're getting some of it. Like my phone keeps vibrating like all hell. So we are still getting some news, but we're also still waiting on a lot. And so my approach to this slate is to, lock in on the guys I like in these earlier games, these 7 o'clock starts. But I am not against forcing more exposure in these late games just to kind of give me some versatility when needed as we get that news so I can adjust. And then I like the guys I have men's on really either way. So it kind of went hand in hand. So I don't do that every slate, but I did do it this one. Good to see y'all in the chat. Appreciate the support, y'all. And yeah, hit the like button. That helps a lot. I forget to say that sometimes. And I see some of the questions. I'll try to get to them, but really it's going to be tough because we have 9 games and we're already a little bit behind. But hopefully we'll get to it. Appreciate you, Chad, man. Last night was a good slate. You guys know me. I like to celebrate even the small wins. Even when you break even, you're doing better than 80% of players. But last night was like a really good win. So we'll take it when we can. Hopefully we can keep it going. But, it's a DFS is a roller coaster. You'll have highs, you'll have lows. I know Nezzy was in the chat talking about it earlier today. But let's get to the slate. 7 o'clock game. First things first, we have the Nuggets going up against the Celtics. Relatively widespread, third widest spread on the slate here at 9.5 points, and then 230.5 total. So for Denver tonight, they are without Nikola Jokic. Joe Val is out still. And other than that, no new injury news. I think the biggest thing is just that they have a lot of guys returning. They were missing a lot of guys, and then now they're back. Even Aaron Gordon, who's been out for a minute, is back. So the matchup here is what makes it uninteresting for me. I don't like picking on Boston. Jamal Murray is just one of those guys when Nikola Jokic is out, I just like having more exposure to. He's been pretty hit or miss in these spots, but 9-game slate, I don't want to not have any Jamal Murray when I'm running 150 lineups. Mega Royal, you are on it, man. Yeah, it was Takedown Tuesday. We need something for Wednesday, though. I know NFL being gone hurts. Appreciate the update. No Brandon Miller. Yeah, the Orlando Chalk did suck last night. We kind of mentioned it towards the end of the show. We were like, oh, highest owned Paulo. Not a bad fade spot. I still had that 30% min on him, but just matching the field didn't kill me. Kevin Wagwan, man. Wagwan. All right, that's it. 10% min on Jamal Murray, and none of these guys are showing up. Man, my ADD brain is not meant for these long slates. It's just, I'm all over the place. All right, we have the Boston side of this game. Boston, no new injury news here. Let me double check that just in case I'm wrong. Yeah, I mean, Josh Minot is out, but that doesn't change things for me too much. Pretty run-of-the-mill matchup here. I have a 10% min on Jaylen Brown. Technically a leverage play. I'll be double the field there. Just a low-owned stud on this slate. Not a ton of pay-up options on this slate. And so because of that, I like getting exposure to the lower-owned ones per usual. And Mega Royal, man. That was good. That was good. But yeah, I like being over the field on Jaylen Brown. Derek White is just a meh play for me. Just someone I like having exposure to because we know the ceiling he can have, especially in one of the relatively higher totals on the slate. They're all kind of close to each other besides like 2 spots, but good game environment all the same. And then none of the other Denver guys show up for me none of the other Celtics guys show up for me besides that 10% min on Brown and 10% min on White. Just a meh game all around, but there's some potential blow up spots at low ownership. Is kind of the way I'm seeing it. Next up, we have the Raptors going up against the Hornets. Close spread here, just a 2-point spread. Decent total at 229.5, pretty average these days. So not a spot I'm trying to avoid for either team. The annoying part, or I guess good for them, is that they're pretty healthy. Toronto, Jakob Poeltl is still out, so we've seen this kind of go back and forth with Colin Murray-Boyles, with Sandro Mamu Kashalavi, I can't say his name. I don't even know why I tried. Mamu. Those two are the bigs for this team. And it kind of goes back and forth on who's going to be the guy to pop off. It's been Colin Murray Boyles recently. He's the cheaper guy. I'm willing to force some exposure to him, but I'm not overly passionate about it. He's been good, though, so I can't argue with it. And I'm never against playing guys against the Hornets. They're not really like a team you want to force bigs against anymore just because they gotten better at rebounding, but they're still a not good defensive team. So you don't have to be worried about playing anyone against the Hornets. Is kind of how I view them at this point. If there's guys who are priced well, I'm willing to force some exposure to him. So 10% min on Colin Murray Boyles, 15% min on Scotty Barnes. He's one of those mid-range pay-up options that I like a good amount on this slate. I'm not going too crazy because there's 9 games and this is one of the earlier games, but he's someone I do like a lot on this slate. Of course, he'd be better if RJ Barrett or Ingram or Quickly are still rolled out. He's not super consistent, but at his price tag in a pace-up spot, I like him. Sim Model likes him too. We're not going to do this for every player because we just don't have the time to. But if you don't believe me, 8,500 on the Sim. We look at him. If we look at the 7X column, you can go all the way up to the top. There's absolutely no one else who has a percentage at all in the 7X column. So he's an outlier, and I like forcing exposure to outliers. So he's someone that I like being over the field on. I kind of want to be a little bit more aggressive, but I have so many mins, I'm not trying to get too cute with things. So 15% min on Scotty Barnes and 10% min on Colin Murray Boyles, and we call it a day. Hornets get a little weird because I believe we just got the news that, let me double check. Yeah, Brandon Miller is out. So with Brandon Miller out, that's an increase in usage for pretty much all of the starters. Think LaMelo Ball, Mikal Bridges, Knipple. Ryan Kalkbrenner's been out, so guys like Diabate have been seeing more minutes. I already have a mins on these guys, but I'm going to look around the industry some and see if ownership is increasing. Let's see if we've increased ownership or anything, because it looks like not too much has changed with that news, which kind of tracks. On slates this large, you'll see ownership not move a lot with the news, especially if there's other Q tags that people think will be bigger. And yeah, it looks like we might be a little bit more aggressive, if anything, on ownership here. But I already like LaMelo Ball. I have a 5% min on him. With Brandon Miller out and him seeing an increasing usage, the price tag keeps going down. Minutes are becoming a little bit more consistent. LaMelo Ball just does what the fuck he wants to. But I'm going to put a 10% min on him. I'll make him a pre-lock show leverage play. With Miller out, he's a player I like a lot in these pace-up spots. And yeah, I like him. Same thing with Con Knipple. I have a 10% min on him. I will increase that too with the news that Brandon Miller is out to about 15%. And then y'all know me. I don't like Miles Bridges, but with Miller, I'll put a 5% min on him. I kind of mentioned I am forcing exposure a lot to the later games, but you can kind of tell ownership's just not on any of these early games, which might be a bit of a mistake. So I like forcing exposure there. And yeah, it gets weird sometimes. Trey Murphy's out. That's a good thing. Trey Murphy came through for us last night, but we need a little bit more clarity with the Pelicans here. And yeah, you're not wrong, McNasty. There's some Pelicans we can look at here. All right, for Chicago. Josh Giddey is out. Jalen Smith is out. Kobe White is out. None of that's like super new. So that's why you're not seeing these guys pop a ton. Matchup against Detroit isn't my favorite to really pick on almost ever, but Jalen Duren is still ruled out, which means that this matchup is a bit softer, at least when it comes to the front court, than it looks on paper. Paul Reed and Isaiah Stewart aren't guys I'm worried about from a defensive standpoint. So with that being said, Nikola Vucevic is someone I like a lot. I have a 20% min on him because of the softer matchup. We know he can be an aggressive big. No Josh Giddey, that usage rate also comes up some too. So he's just someone I like being over the field on. I don't hate like a 25, 30%, but he's only showing up in 20% of lineups, so I'm not going to force it with so many games on the slate. Buzelis. I thought I was close to field weight exposure on him, but looks like we increased his ownership some. The sim model, I believe, is what got me on Buzelis, but I'm always a little bit intrigued by him whenever someone like Josh Giddey is out. And yeah, sim model likes him a good bit. So we're just gonna continue to stay around field weight exposure here. I still don't love the matchup, but again, front court a little bit better. But I'll put a 15% min on him, just kind of keep that going. And then Trey Jones, I have a 10% min on. Matchup could get a bit softer if Cade ends up getting ruled out, but I don't know how necessary he is at this point. I do like the price tag at 5,900. I'll keep it. If I had it, I'm just going to ride with it. So 10% min on Trey Jones. That is a lot of leverage over the field, though. And then we're just matching the field on Buzelis and then slightly over on Vucevic. Yeah, that's a good game plan. You don't want to go too crazy with the Chicago guys because, again, like Detroit is a pretty good defense. Decent total, widespread, though. So there's a risk of blowout. But I'm not usually overly concerned about that. For Detroit, Jalen Duren is out. That's why Paul Reed is the chalk of the slate. Makes sense. But Cade Cunningham being questionable is the really big thing here. Tobias Harris is out too. That's not new. But Cade, if he's out, we are going to see the returns of Dennis Jenkins. And that's chalk I like at 3,800. So this is a game. We'll get that news while we're live, probably. And I would expect Jenkins to show up in a lot of lineups if that's the case. If he plays, I will put a 10% min on Cade Cunningham. Again, like whenever someone has a Q tag, people get nervous. He is dealing with a wrist injury, is what it's listed as. But a soft matchup against the Bulls is something I'm never afraid of. And this is a soft matchup. The Bulls are not a good defensive team. And so for Detroit, Paul Reed shows up a lot by himself. He shows up in about 81% of my lineups. And it looks like the rest of this are just maybe my mins. And without that Cade news, I'm not forcing exposure to anyone else. But if Cade is out, I would like guys like Asar, probably take a shot on Ivy. But for now, I'm not doing anything. Isaiah Stewart was showing up a lot for me, and I capped him at 30%. Now he's not showing up at all, and I think I'm okay with that. Yeah, he is a way of getting a little bit different off of the chalky Paul Reed play, but he's not seeing low ownership either. If he was low owned, I would play him all day, every day at this price tag. He's just not someone I'm going to force exposure to. He just hasn't shown a lot of ceiling. We know he's a player that has ceiling when he's going off. We just haven't seen it really at all this season. So I'm just going to wait until I do, especially that ownership. Paul Reed, I capped at 90%. I just didn't want him in 99% of my lineups. He's a really good play in this matchup at 5K. It all makes sense. So that's why I only have a 90% cap on him. It's just he's not the same value play he was on Monday. So he's not someone I want 99% of like I did on Monday. So that's pretty much the game plan here. Can't do too much until we get that news. But if Cade plays, it's pretty straightforward. Let's see here. Cade is out. Let's go. It's like they knew we were talking about him. I have no clue how many blocks Stewart has. All right. Well, Cade's out. We'll come back to the Pistons. That gives us a lot of good value in just a lot of hopefully relatively low owned plays and just guys that will shake up some lineups. So we'll see how the DS updates the situation. We have time for that. And so I'll try to not tinker too much so early. All right. Next up, we have the Wizards going up against the 76ers. Third highest total game on the slate at 235.5, but the spread is very wide. For the Wizards, they are missing some guys, maybe because they might get traded. Who knows? We'll see. CJ McCollum is out. Keyshawn George is out. Chris Middleton is out. No CJ last night is the thing that stopped me from having a really, really good night. But, beggars can't be choosers. Chris Middleton being ruled out should help guys like Justin Champagnie. show up in more lineups. George is why Trey Johnson should continue to start. And then CJ, we're expecting Bub Carrington to move into the starting lineup. These guys are priced appropriately where it makes sense to play them. Sar went off for us last night. That was sweet. He is someone I get a little bit nervous about on a back-to-back and going up against Embiid. But Sar has basically been pretty matchup proof. I'm going to look a little bit closer at it to make sure I'm not missing something. Yeah, like honestly, Sar's one of those guys who can just have a big game against pretty much anyone. So I'm not overly concerned about the matchup here against Embiid, but it is still worth noting. That's why I'm not making him a leverage player or anything like that. So 15% min there. Kalabali is just someone I like having exposure to when a lot of the scorers are off the floor for this team. Increasing usage just makes him a bit more viable. The rest of these Wizards are, again, fine plays. They just didn't stand out for me too much. Trey Johnson, I like. There's other guards I like more on this slate, especially with the value we should have now there of Jenkins. The starting lineup for Detroit is really going to kind of point me in the direction I want to go there, so we'll see. And then Champagnie shows up a lot in lineups. I had to cap him at 80%, and now he's showing up in 65% of lineups. I think that should probably stay close to where it is, even with the news we have. But he's someone I didn't want in 99% of my lineup. So that's the only reason why I capped him. Bub Carrington, I do just like less, just because, again, I knew we had the value potentially coming at the point guard position, and in the Thunder game, there's potentially even more value coming for point guards. So it's just a spot I wanted to make sure I didn't have too much exposure to one player who I think is in a good spot, but not anything super special. So I capped him at 60. So he's still showing up in 60% of my lineups, but at least I still have 40% of other guard or point guard spots where there's other guards who are in good positions. Colin Sexton is showing up a lot. I just noticed in this last run I'm assuming it's because he's starting, but I didn't see that news yet. Let's see here. I never hate Sexton, but he's not someone I want this much exposure to. So I am going to cap him at... I think it should work itself out, like I keep talking about with that Detroit news. But I don't want to see him showing up that much right now. Might adjust when we go back at the end, but for now, it's not needed. Okay, we haven't updated that yet. We'll come back to it. The Sixers side of this game, I like a lot more. Y'all know I like picking on the Wizards all day, every day. It's something I do pretty consistently. The spread is scary, but I really don't care about wide spreads typically, especially when it comes to a team like the Sixers, because they usually do keep games relatively close, but they did lose the other night in a game they should have won. So it wouldn't shock me if they just go hard here and do blow out the Wizards, but if that happens, ideally, someone smashing along the way that helps them do that. So Maxey's going to be a leverage play for me tonight. I just like how low owned he is with the upside he has in a soft matchup. So I have a 20% min on him. His ownership only continues to fall. So that's a really nice leverage there. Kind of that Craig Porter Jr. 40% min yesterday was crazy. So hopefully, obviously Maxey's a lot cheaper, but hopefully that will be like really good leverage that helps us tomorrow. Joel Embiid, a little indifferent on, but super soft matchup, low ownership, good game environment. A spot I like being over the field on. VJ Edgecombe has just been really good. And so assuming he continues that in a really soft matchup, 10% min there. But Embiid and VJ is just nothing crazy. Just want to make sure they're showing up in lineups. And then there aren't any other Sixers showing up. It's really just those men's doing the work there. All right, let's see. Am I missing anything? Kristaps is 5,700 and starting. Scary play, but high ceiling. Yep, we're almost there, guys. Yeah, he's on a minutes limit. Cade confirmed out. Yes. Two best values, not Paul Reed. Jason, I'll try to get to that by the end if we have time. All right. So starting off, we have the Pelicans going up against the Hawks. Highest total on the slate, which means this is a game I'm going to force exposure to. Widespread again, though, at 10.5 points. The Pelicans, New Orleans, have no Trey Murphy. We just got that news. And so with him out, this is a back end of a back-to-back for all of New Orleans. So that's one thing to kind of keep top of mind. But Murphy getting ruled out is a boost to guys like Jeremiah Fears, Zion Williams, Derek Queen, and we're expecting Poole to start, but on occasion we've seen guys like Bryce McGowan's also see more minutes or sometimes start. I think they'll go with Poole here is what makes the most sense at this point for this team, but still worth mentioning. So when it comes to who I want to play, Derek Queen's a leverage play for me tonight. No Okongwu. Atlanta's not a team I worry about too much from a defensive standpoint. We know Derek Queen's minutes are everywhere, but I like having him as leverage plays. We know how explosive he can be in positive game environments. We've seen it time and time again, especially in these high total games, is when he typically goes off. So betting very, very high on that with 30% min helps that he's power forward eligible too. Zion, I have a 5% min on. I'm willing to increase that without Trey Murphy. There is the narrative about him sleeping around with more OnlyFans girls, it's a thing that Zion has a problem with. But it looks like his ownership is still tracking to be pretty low. So 5% feels good for a guy that I like, but has been very untrustworthy this season. Just going to look a little bit closer at it and make sure I don't want to force more exposure here. Nah, it looks like his ownership did go up a little bit. Okay, so I will put a 10% min on Zion. This should still be close to double the field. I want to be double the field in this game. Poole, if we do a run, yeah, he's showing up in 51% of lineups. That's okay. He's 5,700. Solid spot for him. I'm not afraid of it. Derek Queen, his ownership should go up too. So I don't do 40. I'll do a 40% min on Derek Queen. I don't usually do mins above that. So we'll still ideally be close to double the field there. Oh, well, never mind. I'll take it off. He's already showing up in 43% of lineups. That's good. And then Jeremiah Fears showing up in 37% of lineups. That's good too. So I like all three of those guys. That works. The only guy I had to make some more changes to was that 10% min on Zion Williamson. Then everyone else shows up by themselves. I wonder if Bryce McGowan shows up. He's a low points per minute guy. So ideally I wouldn't see too much of him, but I wouldn't be mad if he showed up in like a lineup or two. Okay, yeah. He didn't show up at all. That's fine. He's not someone I'm gonna put him in on. All right. Atlanta. Of course, the one and only Trae Young was ruled out. And then Onyeka Okongwu was ruled out, which moved Kristaps Porzingis into the starting lineup. And then guys like Mohamed Gay also see a bit of a boost too with Okongwu out. The tough thing here is that Kristaps Porzingis is still going to be on a minutes limit with his health issues. Like, he just has health issues. And so even when he's in a smash spot, plus spot, should see a ton of minutes, he's not going to see more minutes because he's just not healthy. So the scary thing is, it's just the ownership on Porzingis. I've seen it anywhere from like 25, close to where we have it, all the way to 60%. 60% is a little high for me, but I do still like having him show up because, as we know, we can play any big against the Pelicans because they are hot garbage defensively. So I was comfortable having exposure to Porzingis, but I just wanted to cap him at 60%. I am just keeping a close eye out for him in every run to make sure he doesn't fall too much. I will put a 25% min on him because he did just fall a lot. It's not a safe spot by any means, but for his price tag and the matchup, still a little cheap here, but we'll be begging he's doing something for every single minute he's out there. So 25% min, just match the field. Not too crazy there. Nickeil Alexander-Walker without Trae Young is someone that I'm willing to prioritize in a soft matchup. So 15% min there. Jalen Johnson's one of my favorite studs on the slate, but it looks like he's fallen a bit to around 36%. As long as he stays above 30, I won't put him in. But if I do a run and he's showing up, like let's say around 27%, like around field weight, actually I'm just going to put a 60% min on him. I don't know. When it comes to studs that I like, and his ownership isn't crazy for the highest game total on the slate. And I know people were burned by him a bit last time out, but Jalen Johnson's been great this year. Fade Muhammad Gay. If he was chalky, if he was chalky, I would consider fading him, but he's not showing up right now. Vince Williams is out. Pels are starting Makovic. What in the hell? Let me look at this. Let's see. SGA is still questionable. JJJ is a game time decision. John Morant's a game time decision. Okay. I haven't seen, at least at a glance, I'm not seeing the starting lineup for the Pelicans. Let me do a quick check. See if we've gotten that in yet. Okay. Yeah, I'm not seeing an official starting lineup yet, but we'll see. All right, so yeah, I'm just going to see. Hopefully the DS lets me do this. Fingers crossed. On a slate like this, I do have some mins on some low-owned studs. It might not let me do a 60% min on Jalen Johnson at his price tag. If it doesn't, I'll just have to react accordingly. But he's the stud I like the most. He's a chalky stud, but it's a really good spot for him, so I'm not trying to fade it. Single entry, I think it's fine too. But for most of my lineups, I would rather have him in there instead of without. Okay, nice. It worked. We'll have to see if it impacted any of the other mins, but it looks like it should be good. Anyone else to talk about here? Dyson Daniels was showing up by himself. I have a feeling he's going to fall. Some with some of the other guards that are going to start to pop now. Dyson Daniels. He's not someone I care too much about being over the field on. I just like having exposure to him in this late game. And again, if we get the news that SGA is out before the time this game starts, that's just another spot I can pop AJ Mitchell into. All right. So we'll go ahead and run that. Next up, we have a pretty gross run of games. We have the Magic going up against the Nets. Magic are playing on the back end of a back-to-back. They played last night. And then to make things worse for Orlando, they don't really have anyone new out. So no one's really going to stand out too much from a DFS standpoint. Jalen Suggs is out, so Black should continue to take on most of the ball handling duties, but he's priced up. Nets are pretty league average defense, so no one's really standing out too much. I like the idea of going back to Paolo after disappointing a lot of people last night at low ownership, but there's just other studs I like more on the slate. So none of the Magic are showing up for me. And honestly, if any of them go off, they're going to be so low owned, I doubt it will matter too much. Also, lowest total game on the slate. Not crazy plays if you want to take a shot on like a Paolo or a Bane. I just didn't get there. Nets going up against the Magic. We keep talking about it. The Magic are not the defensive juggernauts they were last year, but they're still not a bad defense either. I like the spot for Nick Claxton. I keep talking about it. I like playing some of these bigs against Wendell Carter Jr. because he's a little short, a little small. I mean, he's significantly taller than me, so like no shade. But for an NBA center, he's a little small. And I think, was that the star play from last night? Maybe. I don't know. Doesn't matter. But I'm going to go back to it again either way. Claxton's technically a leverage play. 6,200 is a little expensive for some of the value we have on this slate, but because we have so much value, it kind of all starts to even out a little bit where you don't have to have that value in every single lineup. You can pivot in a spot or two because you have value at other positions now too. So 10% min on Claxton doesn't feel like I'm shutting myself off to a really good value play anymore. And then Michael Porter Jr., my guy this year, has been one of the more consistent pay up options, and he remains low owned. So I pretty much play Michael Porter Jr. on most slates when he's not in like a really difficult matchup. And I'm going to continue to do that. Definitely some good leverage there too, with even just a 5% min. And they're showing up there, which is nice. It looked like MPJ might actually be a little bit below that. But the fact that he's still showing up, even if it's 3% versus 5%, is enough for me. Ooh, Claxton's going to be on a minutes limit. Let me see. Did I see that? Man, these games, when there's so much news going on, it's so easy to miss. Like one thing. Yeah, he will have a minutes limit. How much has he been playing, though? Brooklyn, Claxton, 23 minutes. Don't love that. Appreciate that call, KN, because that makes it pretty easy for me to just not do that anymore. So take that man off and keep it moving. Thomas, appreciate you too, man. Y'all keep me honest there. I appreciate that. All right. Yeah, you probably will. All right, next up we have Clippers against the Knicks. This is a game that I like a little bit more than it seems like other people do, but I still don't love it. The thing here for the Clippers is, once again, they are a healthy team. Okay, 2 lineups might have to hand build. No new injuries here for the Clippers, and not a great matchup going up against the Knicks. The nice thing is this game should stay relatively competitive, one of the closer spreads we have on the slate. And whenever that's the case, I'm more willing to take a shot on these studs that can overcome a difficult matchup, like Kawhi Leonard. He's been so good, and the sim model also likes him, so that's a guy I like being over the field on. He's a leverage play for me tonight. Not like my favorite play, but that doesn't really matter in the long scheme of things. When the sim model likes him, I'm going to force some exposure. Harden, I could get behind. I just don't like him too much. Zubac, I don't like either. Those two are viable DFS plays, but they just didn't make it for me. Next up, we have the Knicks side of things, and I like these guys a bit more. I have a 10% min on Jalen Brunson and a 10% min on Cat. In competitive games, I just like having exposure to them. I always lean Cat just because he's always the lower owned guy, and I'm just closer to field weight exposure on Brunson. Both of these guys can just get there, especially when they're low owned in tough matchups. It's one of those things where matchups just don't seem to matter too much for these guys, nor totals, because we've seen them do it there before too. 10% shouldn't kill me either way, but again, it will help me a lot if they do well. Last 2 games of the slate, the 8 p.m. start times is when things get a little weird. For Phoenix tonight, they are without Corey Kispert. Doesn't matter too much, but he's out. That just helps some of the forwards a bit. Matchup against Memphis isn't one to really be afraid of or avoid. I've gone back and forth on Devin Booker like all day. I don't play Devin Booker a lot. He just doesn't have a lot of ceiling, and I hate players who don't have a lot of ceiling. But to counter it out and balance a little bit more, I like to have exposure to the late games on the slate, and he's not too chalky, which makes me feel a bit better about it. And he's point guard, shooting guard eligible. So if SGA gets ruled out, that again allows me to be flexible with other lineups. The only problem is for these 8 o'clock games, if we get that news at like 7:30, there aren't really other pay up options to look at too much besides like Jalen Johnson or Jalen Williams, maybe Chet a little bit. But long story short, I ended up putting a 15% min on Devin Booker, just to have some exposure here. There aren't too many pay up options I love on this slate, so I didn't hate adding him into the mix, even though he's not typically like a 50, 60 point fantasy guy. Hopefully in this spot he can be. Totals solid at 232. Just interesting. Mark Williams, though, is a leverage play for me tonight. A center I like a lot. Nice pivot off of Paul Reed. You can play him with Paul Reed. I like picking on Memphis in general. And Mark Williams has been good. It seems like no one really talks about it, but he's been solid here recently. So I like having leverage on Mark Williams here in this spot. Then the other Phoenix players like Dylan Brooks, Jordan Goodwin, they aren't bad. I was really just kind of trusting the DS on them because I didn't feel overly passionately about them one way or the other. And I'm not upset that they're not showing up. I think we do have better value at the guard spot than Goodwin. And then Dylan Brooks is someone I'll just play typically on smaller slates. Showtime going over on Booker. All right, man. I mean, it's a good matchup and spot for him. So hopefully we see a ceiling performance. It just hasn't been typical. Hot Billy, I see you, man. I see you. All right, last game here. Jazz going up against the Thunder. Y'all know my philosophy here. I'll take shots on occasion if it's really kind of more of a gut feel for me on playing guys against the Thunder. Like I think we did it on Monday a little bit, and it was a smaller slate, so it just made more sense to me. But on a slate this size with no real injury news, you're not going to find me playing any of these Jazz players. Maybe Keontae George. I would usually take a shot on at this price tag, but in this matchup, I don't love it. Even Lauri Markkanen, like Markkanen to me is one of the easiest guys to figure out in DFS. He does well in really soft matchups, and he sucks against anybody else. Going up against the Pelicans, yeah, sure, play him. Wait, when else was he good? I feel like is it only against the Pelicans? We don't have time for this. I can't go on a rant about guys are not playing. All right, we're not playing the Jazz. For the Thunder tonight, this is now the news of the slate once we got that Detroit news. For OKC, SGA is questionable. Now a game time decision, actually. And so I think we skipped over it with the Memphis guys. I might need to go back to them. Did I miss Memphis? Yeah, let me go back to Memphis. Like I told you all, like I'm all over the place today. Memphis, they have Ja Morant listed as questionable. Jaren Jackson Jr. is questionable. Coward is out. Aldama is questionable. There's a chance here we have a lot of options of players who are in really good spots depending on how the injury news plays out. Right now, trying to be ahead of the game here a little bit. I have a 10% min on Cam Spencer, who's a really solid play like last night if Ja Morant gets ruled out. I don't love the matchup. So, I mean, maybe 5% is probably more, like maybe the better path. Jock Landale, I like either way, but he becomes an even better play if Jaren Jackson Jr. and Santi Aldama get ruled out. There's not going to have a lot of bigs here. Gigi Jackson, I like if guys like Jaren Jackson get ruled out, Santi Aldama get ruled out. I think they'll just have to use him more at the 4 and 5 spot. And he already is starting because Coward's out. So just a guy who benefits a good amount. And I want to have exposure in like forced lineups to have some exposure to these guys, because if not, you'll have a ton of exposure to these, like to the Pistons, to the Pelicans, and you just won't have exposure for these guys or room in your lineups if you don't. And so it's risky. Like these are dead lineups if all these guys play, but I'm willing to take that shot on like 20-ish% of lineups for if they do. So more of a wait and see scenario for now, but those are just some guys I want to force exposure to. Jalen Wells falls into that category too. He benefits more if like Aldama's out. But again, we just have to wait and see. But it's a spot I do potentially like a lot. We talked about the Jazz already, and then OKC. SGA is questionable. That's huge. If he's out, big usage bumps for Jalen Williams, big usage jump for Chet. And then, of course, like AJ Mitchell would be one of the guys on this slate at 4,800. We've seen what he can do. He has 50-point upside, especially in this matchup. Kaysen Wallace would see a boost, and then I think we would expect Joe to see more ball handling duties too. But for now, I have a 20% min on Jalen Williams. Again, I like Williams. I like Chet Holmgren. If SGA plays or doesn't play, but I like forcing exposure to them, hoping he doesn't play, and already having some lineups with them in it. Aaron Wiggins, I have a 20% min on. This is more of a sim-model play, but he also would benefit if SGA gets ruled out too, but it's not one for one. It's more of just like a usage thing. So yeah, guys, very, very interesting slate. Ivy starting. All right, I like that a little bit. Largest increase in usage with Cade Cunningham out. Let's see. I think I can pull that up. Okay, I might actually not be able to pull that up while I'm live. It's just going a little bit too slow. We touched on it a little bit, but let's go back to this. We now have Jalen Duren and Cade out. Pretty much all of the starters just see an increase in usage. Ivy and Jenkins just become much more viable plays because they're the ones who are going to be playing the guard spot for Cade. So on top of the minutes they usually see. So I like what the DS is doing with projections. It pretty much boosted all of them. Let me just do a fresh run and see how much of these guys are showing up. And then make adjustments as needed. All right. Almost there. All right. So Jaden Ivey's in 93% of my lineups with him starting. I'm okay with that. I like Jaden Ivey. He just usually doesn't see as many minutes as we need him to, but he is a pretty solid points per minute guy. He's a little injury prone, but in this soft matchup, like I'm always more willing to eat the chalk in these spots when it's a soft matchup. And Chicago is a soft matchup, so I'm okay with that. Paul Reed is showing up in 75% of lineups. Without Cade, I feel even better about his usage here, so I'm okay with that. Isaiah Stewart is starting. Interesting. I'm going to take this cap off him then. Him starting solidifies his minutes. I think they'll try and play big against Chicago, which is fun. And I like Isaiah Stewart, so I'm going to take that cap off him. Again, because like all the starters see an increase in usage of Cade. So it just makes everyone more viable. It's not even just position focused. He's still a little risky, but I like having a lot of exposure to him here. We'll see how much he showed up. Then the final starter, Duncan Robinson, not going to force that. Granted, it is some bias there. Y'all know I don't love. Let's see, does Stewart show up by himself at all anymore? Ew, only 5% of lineups. Okay, I'll match the field. I'll put a 20% min on him. Hopefully that will work. Asar Thompson, I want to have show up more. It doesn't look like I have him showing up too much. And then Jenkins, even coming off the bench, I want to see. So he's showing up at 15. I want to kind of like force him to show up in 20% of lineups. I think 15 is a bit of a safer number because he could easily just not see the court too much. But I want to make sure he shows up more. Asar Thompson, I'll put a 20% min on. I just like the matchup. He's not the best. Holland isn't bad, but I'm not going to get there on this slate because we already have Ivy. And I think that's going to be it for me. Let's see if this works. Salary min. Shane, I don't really use the salary minimum function in the DS. It's there. I've never touched it. Billy, we do not have time on this show, unfortunately, for me to make DK lineups. Maybe one day. No, unfortunately, if I go back to work tomorrow, so we're just gonna get tighter and tighter on time. Maybe if DFS Army gets bigger, we can have more full-time coaches, but I don't think we're there. Levert back tonight too. Interesting. Okay. He doesn't want me to make one lineup. And now I'm just going to look at my exposures and just make sure everyone's showing up the way I want them to. I do use a lot of mins. And so sometimes the DS doesn't like that if I use too many, and it won't listen to all of them because I have a lot, and sometimes it's just not possible. And there's some players I care a bit more about than others. And if it's someone I like a lot, I'll increase a projection. So like with Kawhi, I'm going to increase him to 53. For Jaylen Brown, I like him a lot. I'll increase his to like 50 to try and get him to show up a bit more. LaMelo, I like a lot. I'll do that to try and make him show up around 40. And then MPJ, I like enough to boost him. And then there's some other mins in here that it's not listening to fully. I do want to check out the Pelicans before we wrap up. Before I do like one more run, just kind of make sure they're showing up the way I want them to. And then we'll be good. Good. All right. Where are we at? 103. Still have some time. We went heavy on Jalen Johnson, which I like. Yep, good luck out there, man. Hope it's a good one for you. All right, Pelicans. Yep, Derek Queen showing up over the field, which was what we wanted. I don't think these other Pelicans are showing up, though. Derek Queen, 25%. That's just going to have to be good enough. Jordan Poole, I like. But am I going to force more exposure to them? Because it's giving me Carrington, Jenkins. Ooh, it might be because of that. That's the hard part, is like when there's so many good guards, you really just can't. So I'm going to lower Jenkins to 15% min. And then that should naturally boost fears up some. I'm just going to try and boost all these guys a little bit. Jordan Poole. It's the highest total game on the slate. It's just what I always tell myself. Like, this is a spot I want exposure to. Fears, Zion. There's really Williamson and Queen that I need to make sure I'm just prioritizing. So as long as that's good, I'm okay riding the rest out. Because it's the kind of slate you're gonna have to late swap, and so a lot of these like minuscule changes aren't really worth focusing on too much yet. Showtime, good question. Let's look and see what the Porzingis exposure is during this last run. Hopefully he's actually at 25 at least. Yeah, holy smokes, is honestly kind of what gave me a little bit of pause there for half a second. Porzingis is showing up in 31% of my lineups, which is perfect for me. And Poole is now showing up in 28% of lineups, which I like. I like being right around field weight exposure. I think that's where he'll be from an ownership perspective, is right around like 20-ish%. And so being slightly over is fine. But I don't love Poole tonight or anything like that because he is seeing Daniel's defense and he is a little turnover prone. So there's that. But Jordan Poole isn't scared to shoot either. So I like having exposure to him in a spot where he should see an increase in usage. 35 might be a little high, though. I'm going to try 34 because I would prefer to be around 20. Whereas like Queen and Zion are the guys I actually want to see a lot more of. 7% is fine. I'll try like a 4.2.5, boost it up a little bit, and then just kind of call that my last run. Because like I said, these 7:30 games, I'm pretty sure we're going to have to late swap once we get that Thunder news. So I'm not trying to focus on it too much. As long as things aren't crazy with this last run, we'll call it a day. Madness will be back tomorrow, so be good to have him here. Relatively smaller slate too, which is nice. I always like some of the more like 5, 6, 7 game slates. But yeah, it's been a good run. Good run last week or so. Hopefully we can keep it up. Yes, nice. Derek Queen's showing up a bit more. Kawhi's showing up a bit more. Maxey, we're still double the field. Pool's now at 13%. I'm fine with that. Fears is at 11%. Zion is at 9%. Okay, good. Zion and Queen are the two I cared the most about. And then late swap will probably figure the rest out. All right, y'all. So that's going to be everything. I wish you all nothing but the best tonight. And like I said, we'll be back tomorrow. Peace out.